With all four of their running backs from last year still on the roster, the backfield might not seem like an area of concern, but could it be time for a bit of reshuffling with a new offensive scheme heading towards the draft? We're going to be breaking it all down here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on our Monday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in, whether you're tuning in from nearby Issaquah, Washington, or across the country in Providence, Rhode Island. We really appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We are drawing closer to the 2025 NFL Draft. We've looked at quarterbacks, defensive tackles. We're going to discuss a position that maybe some fans are thinking, what's the point? We've got all of our running backs coming back, but this is a historically deep and talented running back class. We're going to be taking a deep dive in, examining whether or not Seattle needs to consider shaking things up a bit with their backfield stable. We'll be getting to that on this jam-packed Monday episode. Without further ado, let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on this Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Heading into the 2024 season, there was a lot of buzz and excitement about the combination of Ken Walker III, Zach Charbonnet, and Kenny McIntosh. You could even throw undrafted rookie George Holani into the mix as well. A lot of buzz coming out of training camp about the backfield talent that the Seahawks had. Unfortunately, when you look at the stat line last year, things just did not go the way as planned with the running game. And you can't blame the running backs for all of that, obviously, Rob. But Ken Walker III, he missed 6 games. When he was healthy, he averaged 3.7 yards per carry, easily the worst mark of his career. Zach Charbonnet played really well in the second half of the season, but he still didn't get to 600 rushing yards. Kenny McIntosh flashed the last 4 or 5 games when he finally got his opportunity, but not a 150 yards guy last season. And George Holani really just played special teams for a few games. When you look in totality at this group, there's a ton of talent. There's no question about that. And an improved offensive line is obviously going to make this entire group a lot better. A more run-centric scheme is going to make them a lot better. But I'm interested on your thoughts on this because at my viewpoint, I hate complacency at any position. And I know the Seahawks have really good running backs, but why can't you go out and get it to where it is great or outstanding running backs? Because this is a phenomenal draft class we'll be talking about later. I am wondering if they need to somehow shake things up a little bit. I'm curious on your thoughts because they do have all their key pieces back from last season in the backfield.
Yeah, that's the thing, Corbin. I think you can make an argument that the Seahawks don't have to do anything at the running back position because of the fact that they do have so many young, talented backs. All of them are on rookie contracts, so you don't have anything forcing your hand from a salary cap perspective, except the fact, as you pointed out, that this class is that talented. That the Kenneth Walker III, while he certainly has some highlight reel plays, that he has struggled with durability. And that Seattle's offense just is missing a beat. They're missing that big play threat when he isn't on the field. With all due respect to a Zach Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh, or George Holani, they just don't have the 4.32 speed that the Kenneth Walker III has. Now, as you said, there's only so much credit or blame that you can put on Seattle's running backs. The Seattle's offensive line play has got to be better. The play calling has got to be better. If you do have that, I really do believe that Seattle already has the running backs in place to be able to be very effective, especially when you consider the fact that with Klint Kubiak and, of course, the litany of coaches that are coming from the New Orleans Saints, they are all used to being able to shuffle different backs in there, not necessarily have just a bell cow kind of a guy. And again, Seattle is very talented at the running back position. They all have a very kind of different skill set. They complement each other well. I think it's going to be interesting to see. I do think that there's a possibility that John Schneider just can't help himself. that he just looks at this draft class and is like, oh my goodness, there's just so many good backs that are on the board still. We're sitting here in the third, fourth, fifth round, and we've got too many backs that have second round grades. My goodness, you just have to take one of these guys. That, to me, is one of the most fascinating elements of this draft. I would argue this is not a position of concern for the Seahawks, and this is not a franchise, in my opinion, that really can justify making what I would call a little bit of a luxury pick. But at the same time, because I do believe that the Seahawks are going to be committed to playing defense and running the football above all else, then there is a possibility that Seattle is going to be taking one of these running backs. And that's why I'm excited to kind of break down some of the elite talents and the elite depth of this year's draft class.
You make a lot of really good points there, and I agree with the idea that it would be a luxury pick if we're talking first, second, probably even third round. But when you get into day 3, you are just looking to get the very best football players that you can get your hands on. And there will be second and third round caliber running backs that will be available on day 3. That is how good this draft class is. That is how talented and how deep it is. And I think when you look at the running back room, Zach Charbonnet was the back that really excelled last year in Ryan Grubb's offense because they ran a lot more gap-oriented schemes. I don't know if he's going to be near as effective in a wide zone offense. Now, maybe he will be. Certainly, it's possible. He has the athletic traits. He's not quite as explosive as Ken Walker III, but he's got good vision. He can break tackles. There's reason to believe he can still be effective. Kenny McIntosh, does he have that extra gear and the quickness that you need? I thought he looked like he did the end of last year. He runs faster than what he did in the 40 and tested. So they've got pieces there, obviously. But as we'll talk about, especially in the last segment, we're looking at day 3. If you have somebody like a Basil Tootin fall to you in the third round that has low 4.3 speed and was a 25 touchdown producer the last 2 years against ACC competition and can catch the football, can pass protect. If you have a player like that is on the board that is just head and shoulders above everyone else for draft grades, then I think you absolutely bring in a running back. And look, 4 running backs on a roster, that ain't enough to go into training camp. Like, you need at least 6 with the injury attrition at that position. I just feel like the Seahawks right now, they have 3 running backs that have 2 or less years of club control left. I think that this is the right time, especially on day 3 with 10 picks. And if they end up with more than that, then you have no reason to not pick a running back in this draft class. I just think the incredible depth and talent, the attrition at the position, and I wouldn't be shocked if Klint Kubiak is wanting to get a running back that is kind of in the mold of Alvin Kamara with what he did with him last year in New Orleans. And, oh, by the way, I'm not saying there's a bunch of Kamaras in this draft, but there are several players that can do the damage out of the backfield very similar to what he can. There are pass-catching running backs galore in this draft class. If there's a wide zone operating back that can catch the football and can move around the formation, Klint Kubiak may be saying, look, I know you got running backs, but that guy fits my scheme better. And that's where personnel could come into play as well.
Yeah, no question about it. And to me, that's one of the most exciting things about this is that when it was John Schneider and Pete Carroll, it seemed like they always prioritize running backs. I mean, there's so many Seahawks fans out there that would kind of, rip their hair out in frustration because Seattle was investing first or second early round picks in running backs. And because I think there was just a belief that you had to have guys who are truly blue chip talents. Whereas, the beauty of that wide zone kind of West Coast offense, if you go back to Rick Dennison's career way back with the Denver Broncos and Mike Shanahan, then I think that you kind of look at some of the backs that those old school Denver Broncos were able to have a great deal of success with. The Terrell Davises, the Olandis Garys, the Mike Andersons, all day 3 picks, all of them are undrafted free agents. And so again, I think that it brings up a point that I think that a lot of the running backs in this class offer that maybe we're not, talking about enough. And that is not just straight line speed, it's the vision. And so I love the fact that you mentioned that with Zach Charbonnet, that he does have good vision. Look, again, I believe that Seattle's running back group is already talented enough to be successful. But at the same time, if you've got a back that you absolutely fall in love with, if he has the, all the intangibles you're looking for, as well as the physical traits, then I don't care if he ran the 4.5s. I'm going to be pointing out a couple of backs that are going to, I believe, slide into day 3 that I think are starting caliber backs, especially in a West Coast offense like the one that Seattle is going to be running. And some of them are from what has traditionally been the Pac-12. So perhaps some of our listeners are going to be very familiar with them. Again, I think that this is a running back class that, while I don't think this is a huge area of concern for the Seahawks, the talent is so good that I think that Seattle might be looking to take full advantage of it.
When we come back, we are going to take a dive into this incredibly deep. I think it's the deepest running back class in the last 25 years, maybe the deepest there's ever been. That's how good we are talking here. We're going to take a dive into the first round and day 2 prospects from this class that'll be coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get into the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. There might not be any more Cinderellas with all 4 1 seeds advancing, but it's the best of the best battling for a national title. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get into the college hoops action all tournament long. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. As we've been doing already with quarterback and defensive tackle, we are taking a deep dive into every positional group linked to the Seahawks roster and the draft. And today just happens to be my favorite position, the running back position. And look, you've been doing this a lot longer than me in terms of draft classes, but I think that you and I would be in agreement that, at least in terms of depth, that this is the best running back class that we have seen in at least the last 15 years, if not longer. I went back and looked at every running back class since 2000, and I don't think there is a group on there that has more starter caliber running backs than what this current incoming draft class does. And you could make an argument that there's 3 or 4 first round caliber running backs, even in today's climate. That is how good this class is. It's just a phenomenal one, and I can't wait to break these guys down.
Yeah, it certainly is among the deepest and most talented running back groups that I've ever evaluated. And I think that, to me, again, is one of the reasons why the Seahawks might take full advantage of it. It's rare that you see a class like this in Corbin that has top-end talent as well as exceptional depth. And so, again, this is a group that I'm excited to kind of talk about, and I'll just jump right in there with a back that I expect to be off the board in the top 10, perhaps, maybe even going with Pete Carroll in the Las Vegas Raiders, and that being Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. And anybody who has listened to our show knows that you are a big fan of the team that plays on the blue field in Boise, and Ashton Jeanty, baby. Yes, Ashton Jeanty is the most phenomenal talent that I've seen at Boise State ever. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, this is one of the true blue chip prospects in this draft class. He led all of college football in rushing attempts a year ago, and yet still averaged 7 yards per carry. And you look at all the opponents that Boise State played, then so many times teams were just kind of crowding the box, hoping to slow him down. And yet he still had gains of 50-plus yards in 9 of Boise State's 14 games a season ago. He is a phenomenal talent. He is a player that I myself have compared to LaDainian Tomlinson of all people. So again, I think that we're talking about a possible Hall of Fame caliber talent here. 5'9", 211 pounds, has the quickness, has the balance through contact, has the breakaway speed, obviously, has the hands out of the backfield. I think he's the total package. I think he's going to be an absolute NFL superstar right out of the box.
He's the best running back that I have ever scouted. Saquon Barkley would have been number one, and that's not taking a slight at Saquon Barkley because he was a phenomenal prospect. But this guy is the most complete back that I have scouted. And it's not just the breakaway speed, the contact balance is as good as I've ever seen it. Look, I'm not a big comp guy, but to me, this is a player that if LaDainian Tomlinson and Marshawn Lynch were morphed in a lab into one guy, it would be Ashton Jeanty, because I don't know how many of those 50-plus yard runs where he trucked a guy or broke through multiple tackles like Marshawn Lynch, and then he took off like LaDainian. I mean, he's just a freak. And, oh, by the way, 2 years ago, this guy had really good receiving numbers. They didn't throw the ball to him much this year, but he is capable of doing a ton of damage as a pass catcher. He can pass protect. He is just an incredible prospect. And I think Pete Carroll's going to have a very hard time not trying to talk the Raiders into picking him if he's there at 6. But he's not going to be there. What is, from a running back class standpoint, what's exciting here, though, Rob, you've got a couple other backs that are getting a lot of first-round buzz right now. Omarion Hampton, who's another explosive back. I don't think he is anywhere close to the same talent as Ashton Jeanty is. But, again, Genty's the best running back I've ever scouted. Hampton is a guy that would make a lot of sense for offenses that are looking for a back that has really good vision, has explosiveness. He brings some pass catching. Denver is a team that I think he will not get past if he is there at pick 20. So the Seahawks at 18, I don't see him taking him, but I think Sean Payton's offense, that Omarion Hampton would be a really good fit. And Travion Henderson, there's 2 running backs from Ohio State we're going to be talking about in this segment, but Henderson's the one that's getting the first-round buzz. I'm in the minority. I actually like Quinshon Judkins just a little bit more than Henderson, but it is kind of that Baskin-Robbins thing. It's the flavor that you desire, because both these guys could be stud starting running backs in the NFL. Henderson's the one that is getting some first-round buzz, though.
Yeah, with back to Omarion Hampton for a moment, there was a lot of talk that, hey, this is a talented back, but he's also playing right next to Drake May, of course. And once Drake May left, North Carolina wound up being, of course, New England Patriots first-round selection. Then all of the pressure was on Hampton, and he led the ACC in rushing yards for the second consecutive season. This is a big back who plays big, 6 foot, 221 pounds. I love his acceleration through contact and then getting to the second level. He has a second gear, so to speak, that I really think is rare for a big back. I love the fact that you mentioned Travion Henderson. Look, I'm with you. I actually like Quinshon Judkins just a hair more than Travion Henderson. But still, we are talking about 2 terrific backs, whether they go in the late portion of the first round or the early portion of the second round. To me, that is one of the hugest or the biggest reasons why the Ohio State Buckeyes wound up, hoisting the national championship trophy this year, is because they had that rotation at the running back position. With Travion Henderson, he's a little bit smaller, 5'10", 202 pounds at the combine, but he has got breakaway speed. He's got hands out of the backfield. He is one of the best pass protectors of this class. You don't often say that for backs who are 202 pounds. So again, he feels like a just out of the box NFL starter, a guy that I think the NFL teams are going to absolutely love when it comes to his intangibles as well as his talent on the field.
Let's talk Judkins for a moment, shall we? Because Henderson, as you mentioned, he's the one that he is the road runner. He is the one that has the breakaway speed to hit a home run at any time. And that's not to say that Judkins can't do that either, because Judkins has some big playability. But I think in the next level, he's going to be more of a chunk yardage player where he's going to get you quite a few 10-plus yard runs. I don't know that you're going to get those 40-plus yard runs that Henderson has the potential to do. But Judkins is more of a physically imposing back. He is more of a punishing style back. And I wonder if he has the build to hold up better in the National Football League as more of a bell cow than what Henderson can. Now, Henderson can play all 3 downs. I think Judkins can too. I mean, these guys are both very well-rounded. So to me, Judkins is probably a mid-second round pick. It's crazy. We're talking 4 running backs already in 2025 that are going to probably be gone at this point. But I think what Philadelphia just did and what we're seeing, there's a rebirth in the run game, and running backs are starting to be valued a lot more again. And, oh, by the way, this class is just that good. Let's get to the back that I'm really excited to talk about here, though, and that is Caleb Johnson from Iowa. And, look, if you're looking to draft somebody that's in the 4.3s, Caleb Johnson did not test that well. He ran in the low 4.5s. He is not a burner. And yet you turn on the film, Rob, I don't know how many times for Iowa this year that this guy just made Big Ten corners and safeties look like they were peewee leaguers. Like he just started running away from them. This guy looks like he runs a 4.3 with pads on, and there's just running backs that are that way. And he's a bigger body guy, but tons of big play ability. He is a punisher. He slithers through tackles. He trucks over guys. And he was one of the most productive backs in college football this past season. It maybe isn't getting as much buzz because he didn't test quite as well. It wasn't quite as sexy in the underwear Olympics. But if you're looking for a really, really good running back, I would make the argument that this guy is just as good, if not better, than the two Ohio State prospects when I've turned on tape. I think Caleb Johnson's that kind of a talent.
Well, and he was more productive than either of those Ohio State running backs. And, of course, he was the bell cow for the Ohio Hawkeyes, whereas, of course, the two Ohio State backs were basically feeding off of each other. But still, Caleb Johnson was kind of the breakout back this past season. I mean, he was unbelievable. I mean, he led the Big Ten, 1,537 rushing yards. He had 21 touchdowns. And, Corbin, you yourself, as a former running back coach, I can understand why you would like Caleb Johnson because he just runs with high knees and hunched shoulders. I mean, he takes on contact and then dishes it out. There were so many broken tackles that he created for himself to be able to make big plays. Now, I would say all those things. At the same time, anybody who has watched Iowa football knows they can be frustrating. They don't throw the ball very much, and Caleb Johnson was not asked to pass protect as much as some of the other backs in this draft class.
But when he did, he was good.
He was good. And so that's the thing. It's going to require a little bit of a projection to the NFL. I think that he's going to be a very successful NFL back, but he's also one of those backs. If you're a fantasy football enthusiast and you're wondering how quickly is a back going to get onto the field, because he does have some at least perceived limitations in the passing game. He is one of those backs. I think he can be kind of the thunder guy, but you may need a lightning guy, and you may need somebody to sub out for him on obvious passing downs because of his current limitations in the passing game, at least in my opinion.
One more back that I want to talk about for day two, and this has been a popular name on this podcast. People that have listened to the show every day, again, we greatly appreciate each and every one of you. You've heard of DJ Giddens, and it's just like Iowa. Kansas State is just one of those blue-collar programs that just seems to prepare guys to play at the next level. Even with new coaches now, it's no longer Bill Snyder's program, but you can still feel the imprint of all those years Bill Snyder was there, just the kind of players they recruit, the players they develop. And DJ Giddens is just the latest in the line of players coming out of Manhattan that just has that hard hat mentality. And he's not a guy that trucks a lot of people, even though he's a bigger back at 6'2", over 210 pounds. He's kind of got more of an Eric Dickerson type body where he's tall and kind of lean, but he's a glider. And he just makes dudes miss left and right. He did it against Big 12 competition. He did it against other Power 4 schools in Kansas State's schedule and just rips off a lot of chunk plays. Not the guy that's going to hit you a bunch of home runs necessarily, but he will move the chains consistently, and he will make guys miss. He's going to get a lot of yards after contact because he's just somebody people don't square up very much. And the thing that makes him stand out, we're talking about zone concepts. I don't know that there's a back. Ashton Genty probably is ahead of him because Genty's just a freak. But DJ Giddens, I would argue, has in the top 2 or top 3 ball carrier vision in this entire class. He can sense a cutback before it actually happens. And those kind of backs can be special in wide zone schemes because of how quickly those seams open up for cutback lanes, how quickly they close. He's as good as anybody at having that sixth sense for that. And that to me makes him somebody that if he's there in round 3, the Seahawks may very well have a tough time going that route because he can pass protect, he can catch. He's just a tough minded dude.
He is a tough-minded dude, and I love the fact that you pointed out his vision. Eyes and feet, to me, are two of the most critical elements when it comes to evaluating running backs. And there's no doubt in my mind that Giddens has the eyes as well as the feet. He does sense those cutback lanes. 1.53 in a 10-yard split. I mean, that was as fast as Travion Henderson, who, of course, gets a great deal of credit and actually led the country in yards per attempt this past season. So, again, Giddens has that explosive speed to take advantage of those cutback lanes. I want to mention another speedster, and that would be Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. He only had 1 year as the full-time starter with the Vols, but what a year it was. He was voted the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, 22 overall touchdowns. That's the most from any non-quarterback in the SEC in almost literally a century, 95 years to be exact. I kind of, like to nickname this guy Spin Cycle, just because of the way that he rushes to the possible tackler and then spins off of contact, as well as any back in this class. His burst is unbelievable on the field. Actually, in the 40-yard dash and in the measurables, he wasn't as good as I thought, but I do love his speed on tape. I do think that he could be another one of those kind of mid-round picks that could surprise a lot of people if given a little bit more opportunity for playing time.
When we come back, it might be hard to believe, but there's a lot more running backs for us to dive into as day 3 prospects. We'll be getting to that up next year on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to Locked On Seahawks Monday edition. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's time to continue diving into this incredibly deep running back class. We just looked at the players that probably will be gone in the first 3 rounds. We might throw a couple names out here that sneak into the 3rd round just because of how deep this running back class is. But this is our cutoff line, and some of these players we're going to be talking about, there's going to be some apparent flaws. A lot of the players we just talked about are really complete backs. Now we're going into day 3. You still got some talented guys, but there may be some question marks here. And I'm going to start things off with a player we've talked about a lot to this point because he might have had the most impressive combine performance of any running back in Indianapolis. Basil Tootin from Virginia Tech. Incredibly productive the last couple years for the Hokies, and he previously was a FCS player, then transferred to Virginia Tech and didn't miss a beat. Guy goes to the ACC, has 25 rushing touchdowns, averages over 5 yards per carry in his 2 seasons at Virginia Tech, and all-conference running back. He's got fumble issues. That is why I have him as a day 3 talent, because that, being a former running back and running back coach, that is in my top 3 things. I look for vision, I look for touch, and then can you hold on to the dang football? And Tootin has not been able to do that. He's had 9 fumbles the last 2 years for Virginia Tech. Do I think that's something that can be corrected? Hey, look at Tiki Barber. He almost got out of the league in New York because he couldn't hold on to the ball. They worked with him, and then he became one of the very best in the league. It is an area that you can coach up in the NFL, but he is going to have to show that he can hold on to the football and he can be more consistent catching it. He had too many drops in his college career as well. But as far as pure runners, another guy that's got really good vision. He's built kind of like Maurice Jones-Drew. So I call him mini pocket Hercules. This guy can truck through guys, break a lot of tackles. He's explosive, low 4.3 speed. It shows up on film. A guy that I really like a lot. I just feel like there are some big question marks that he's going to have to figure out if he wants to see the field as a 3-down back.
Yeah, and a player that I don't think has that many question marks, but I think is being a little bit slept on in this draft class just because of all the talent that Oregon has is Jordan James, 5'10", 205 pounds. And, 205 pounds, it doesn't sound like an especially big back, but he's got really thick thighs, and he takes on, would-be tacklers with a similar type of a ferocity as what I saw from Thomas Rawls, a former Seahawks standout running back there for a couple of years, and that he does not want to run out of bounds. He wants to put guys on their backside, but at the same time, he also has terrific lateral agility. That was one of the things I was very, very impressed with, going to Eugene and actually evaluating their prospects, in person at their pro day. I think that Jordan James is a guy that's going to be drafted probably third, fourth, maybe even fifth round. That's going to wind up being a starter in the NFL. So again, he is one of the backs that I like. That he's just a little bit below elite in any one area. But at the same time, again, the contact balance, the agility, as well as the power and the finishing mentality, to me, he checks off all of those boxes. And I'll mention another back from the traditional Pac-12, and that being Woody Marks from USC. Now, Woody Marks, before he was at USC, he was originally at Mississippi State. And so playing in the late, great Mike Leach's offense, as well as at USC, he got the ball thrown to him a lot. 261 career receptions, and not all of them were little dink passes. Some of them were when he was lined up outside as a wide receiver. His ability on wheel routes, checking the ball, catching balls that are coming in over his shoulder. I really think that he could be exactly the type of pass catching threat that Klint Kubiak has taken full advantage of in prior years and some of his other stops.
I'm going to reference one of my favorite bands here, Judas Priest, because Bo Scatabo and Devin Neal, to me, they are the hammer and the anvil. These two guys just absolutely pummel people. And if you watched Arizona State on their miraculous run to the college football playoff, and they almost knocked Texas off, came back in that game because of Bo Scatabo. Scatabo has not tested great. And to be honest, I didn't expect him to. He just screams blue-collar back. Like, I didn't expect him to go out and run in the 4.4s. But he is a fantastic football player. And I'm going to make this argument for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to make a very compelling one here. I think that Bo Scatabo should be at the very top of their list for day 3 backs, because I think that you could have a 2025 version of John L. Williams if you draft this kid. I put him at fullback in Klint Kubiak's offense. Can you imagine the things that they could do, Rob? Because he's a very good receiver. He is an outstanding runner. He trucks people, bulldozes dudes. Oh, and by the way, he can throw. You could run fullback passes with this kid. He threw a touchdown in that game against Texas. And this guy is a football player. If you ask him to go run down a kickoff and nail somebody, he'll go do it. He's just one of those kind of guys. If you could get him in the 4th or 5th round, Klint Kubiak would be drooling at the possibility of that's your Kyle Juszczyk with more running ability and more trucking ability. He's that kind of a player. I am all in on that. And Devin Neal would be a running back. He wouldn't be a fullback. But Devin Neal is just one of those guys that when he gets downhill, he just lowers the boom. Ask Colorado's defense about it. This guy, and he's a workhorse. He had 3 games this year with 35-plus carries. He is old school, and he'll tote the rock 30-plus times, no problem. He's durable. He is a better athlete than advertised. To me, Devin Neal might be the most slept-on running back in this deep, talented draft class, and I think he would make a lot of sense on day 3 as well.
I 100% agree with everything that you just said about each of those backs. I also would throw out one other guy that I think has the straight line speed that a lot of people are, again, sleeping on a little bit. And that's unusual coming from the University of Texas. But Jadon Blue is another player. He's only 196 pounds. And so, again, this is a back that is much smaller and slighter than the most of the backs that Seattle has. But he has that 4.38 speed. That, to me, is something that the Seahawks are lacking any time that Kenneth Walker III is not on the field. And you consider the fact that this guy in blue sat behind Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson, Jonathan Brooks. I mean, those were all 4th-round picks or earlier. Of course, in the case of Bijan Robinson, top 10 selection and an absolute superstar for the Atlanta Falcons. And so Jadon Blue is a guy that just didn't get very many opportunities, but he has electric speed. And he can make people miss in the open field as well. So it's not just about speed. It's about agility and quickness. And then, again, that balance through contact. And this young man has all of those things, at least in my opinion. So, again, is the point that we've been kind of trying to hammer home here, Corbin, this is a draft class that it would almost be surprising if the Seahawks didn't take advantage of it, even though I think you can make an argument, it's not a huge area of concern. The talent is so good, and you want to keep that team control as far as contracts as long as you possibly can with a talent or with a positional group that has the attrition that running back has.
I set this up this way on purpose just to outline just how historically deep this running back class is. RJ Harvey had 22 rushing touchdowns this last season for UCF. And it's not like this was UCF playing in the American or playing in Conference USA like they used to. This was in the Big 12. He put up massive numbers. This guy is a spark plug, absolutely dynamite. He can break tackles. He can outrun people. RJ Harvey is another one that I think is getting slept on. In a lot of draft classes, he might be getting, late day 2 consideration, but he might not go to the 5th round in this draft just because there are some questions about durability. There's some questions about pass protection. His receiving has been good but inconsistent. He just has some holes in his game as well that I think teams are going to be looking at. There's so many complete backs in this draft, but you could make an argument as far as pure runners that RJ Harvey could be in the top 5 in this class, and yet we're just now talking about him. That tells you how much talent is in this draft class. And we didn't even mention Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State. There's character concerns there, which is why I didn't have him on my list. But he is certainly a talented back. There is no question about it. We could have rattled off 35 names. That is how good this running back class is. And so it would be a surprise to me if the Seahawks do not at some point take advantage here. And maybe the right guy will fall into the 7th round and they think they can get him as a priority free agent. Who knows? But there's a lot of really good backs. There's no question about it. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Ring. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to be shifting gears over to the defensive side of the football, continuing our draft coverage. We're also going to be diving into Mike McDonald's comments coming out of the NFL League meetings down in Florida, and we'll be talking some linebackers in our defensive draft segment. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday night. Go Hawks.